As for the candidate of the opposition, Mr. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, he got 45% of the vote, whereas a lot of the polls prior to the elections were showing that possibly he was going to win in the first round. So we have what I would call a radical turn when it comes to the outcome of these elections, and I think that the biggest winner over here is clearly the current ruling party and President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Furnival. You are watching or listening to an OSW interview. Today I'll be talking to Adam Michalski, an expert from OSW's Turkey, Caucasus and Central Asia department. He'll be telling us about the Turkish elections. What do we know about the results of the presidential elections so far?
Well, everything is pointing to a very decisive victory of the current ruling party, the AKP, particularly in the parliamentary elections where I think that the result is already known. I mean, we have a clear majority for the ruling bloc. 325 places out of 600 are probably going to be within the hands of President Erdogan's parties and then their close allies. When it comes to the presidential elections, we're clearly going to the second round. Here, President Erdogan has almost secured in the first round of elections a clear victory, just falling short of by about 0.5% of actually crossing the magical 50% line. As for the candidate of the opposition, Mr. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, well, he's fallen far below what we had in terms of our expectations. He got 45% of the vote, whereas a lot of the polls prior to the elections were showing that possibly he was going to win in the first round. So we have what I would call a radical turn when it comes to the outcome of these elections, and I think that the biggest winner over here is clearly the current ruling party and President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan.
And how were the elections held? Were they calm? Were they fair?
I think that they were very fair in terms of the transparency. I mean, we had some, at the very beginning of the counter, we had some problems when it came to the different percentages being shown by different news channels. And that had to do with the fact that different agencies were working on gathering the votes, the number of counted votes, and the way they were being presented, depending on the news channel which you're watching, I've either favored the opposition or the ruling party. And that, of course, stoked a lot of kind of questions of what's going on. But as more and more votes were being counted, pretty much all the media in Turkey started showing the same exact percentages and numbers. And I think that's the point where both the opposition realized that there is no real chance how to question these results, especially that the margin of their loss, the opposition's loss, became quite substantial to the point where, you know, you could dispute 1% of difference when it came to the presidential race if it was supposed to be going head to head, but we have a massive difference of 5%. So there really isn't much to dispute. And I think that the opposition realized that there's nothing they can do, particularly in the parliamentary elections. Luckily, they're going into the second round of the presidential elections. So right now, they're going to be focused on that rather than necessarily trying to boycott these elections, which already are clearly, I think, accepted by all sides.
Okay, so the opposition has accepted the preliminary results. What about Erdogan? Is he open to a runoff?
Well, he's definitely right now in a really good spirit and mood when it comes to these elections. I mean, I don't think that he himself was even expecting to get that much of support in the first round. Not to say that, as I've mentioned, he almost won in the first round, and we could have been talking essentially about the end of these elections today. We're not. At this stage, I think that we will have a very active 2 weeks of President Erdogan continuing his campaign trails and, of course, speaking to the citizens of what he's going to do as the president, trying to show himself as one of the few people capable of leading Turkey in these rough times, especially when we have problems with the economy, the country's trying to rebuild after the earthquake, and we have other questions and topics that the citizens want to have answered. So I think that President Erdogan is going to be very much active in the campaign, and we should be seeing also, and I would maybe add this as a disclaimer, possibly a slightly more nationalist turn in the campaign itself, and that has to do with the fact that the third presidential candidate, Sinan Oğan, who is an ultra-right-wing nationalist, anti-systemic candidate. Well, his votes are going to both the presidential candidates are going to have to somehow find a way how to gather them.
He got around 5%.
And he got about 5%. So I think that in order to get these votes, that 5%, both of these candidates are going to have to turn to some type of more nationalist rhetoric. And I think that for President Erdogan, this isn't going to be that much of a problem. But for the opposition candidate, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, he's toned down that strong nationalist rhetoric. I think that he's going to have to right now mobilize this electorate. So what we're going to see is probably from the opposition a slightly more kind of anti-Kurdish, possibly, maybe strong nationalist sentiments coming from his side of the campaign, the opposition side of the campaign.
Is this any danger that it could somehow destabilize the country if the Kurds are being criticized from both sides?
Yes, and to some extent, no. I mean, we still have to remember that the opposition candidate, his votes are also to some extent supported by the Kurds themselves. And this is the problem that he always faces, is on the one hand, how to show himself as pro-Kurdish, but at the same time, turn his face towards the ultra-nationalists and show that he's also a little bit anti-Kurdish. So he's going to have an extremely hard time in figuring out what's the correct balance. And this is where I think President Erdogan has a huge advantage. He doesn't have this dilemma. He can go full out on the Kurds, call them terrorists, and make, campaign gains on the nationalist side. So I think that the bottom line is that Sinan Oğan's votes, the 5% that he's won, are probably going to be much easier to obtain by President Erdogan rather than the opposition. And with the fact that Erdogan already has almost won the first round of elections, what we're likely to see is that this percentage is only going to go up even more. And we're going to have a clear victor on the 28th of May, during the second round of elections.
The momentum is definitely with Erdogan.
Definitely with Erdogan. And I think that a lot of people, while they might not be publicly admitting that, I think that everybody knows that it's most likely Erdogan who is going to be favored in the second round. And if one of the candidates wins, I think that we're not going to be talking about a difference of like 0.5% in votes. I think that that difference is going to be much more clear. Everything points that Erdogan is going to be most probably the one who's going to take it all.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the follow-up conversation after the second round of the Turkish presidential election.